Well, thank you, Donna and Greg. I am super excited to be sharing all things code and custom connector. A little bit about myself. I am an app dev architect with Artist Consulting based out of Dallas, Texas. And I'm also a power addict, passionate about all things Azure and Office 365, the business applications MVP, and also the co-founder of the Dallas Fort Worth Power Apps and Power Automate UG. So today, the next 30 minutes, we're going to be learning or getting a high-level overview of what it means to embed code in custom connectors, why the benefits of enabling code, and then looking at a few example use cases, and then also some of the top frequently asked questions that I've had when this first got released, and also that I've seen being asked in the community. Now, before we start talking about embedding code in custom connectors, let's talk a little bit about what custom connectors really are. So custom connectors are more like a wrapper around a REST or a SOAP API that actually allows Power Automate or Logic apps or Power Apps to communicate with your backend services. They're useful, especially when you don't have a pre-built connector. If you don't have something that's already wrapped up and available for you, then you can create one that can talk to your backend service, be it a legacy system or an API layer, and then you make them available, and that can expose like triggers and actions that can be used or consumed by your users that are building solutions on the platform. Now, within custom connectors, there is this concept of policy templates. They allow you to add policies to modify the behavior of a custom connector at runtime. So you can use one of the out-of-the-box templates that can be used to perform data conversion or maybe route requests, or you can set parameter values and more. But what if those templates don't fit your needs and you need to be able to go above and beyond and transform those request and response payloads beyond the scope of the existing policy templates? So that's where code in custom connectors actually come into play. So when code is used, you have to remember that actually takes precedence over the codeless definition. So very recently, the C# code and custom connectors was made available in public preview. There are several things that you can do with it. You can have complex transformation of your payload or your incoming requests. You can manipulate data to make it easier for connectors to be consumed, especially in Fusion Dev scenarios. You can also add additional data to your response or parameters to incoming requests. And you're not limited to that. You can also send external requests to fetch additional data. Now, the good thing about this, especially in the case of Fusion Dev scenarios, is that you are masking all of that and abstracting that away from your business users. So it makes it really easy for you, being a code first dev, to wrap all of that into a custom connector and then make it easy on your business users to consume it. Now, the next big question is how. How do I get code embedded in custom connectors? Now, before you get started with writing code, I'd highly recommend you review what are the supported classes and namespaces. There's a blue link at the bottom of that screenshot that has a really good write-up of every sample code, and then they also talk to you about what the limitations are and then what you need to know before you start writing. And it's really helpful when you start looking at that as a reference. Not all C# namespaces are supported at this time. But most of the common ones like collections or regex or JSON link, they're all supported. And so the couple of things that you want to keep in mind when you start building is that right now it's only C# code that's supported, and you can only have one code file per connector, and the maximum execution time of your connector has to be 5 seconds. And we have to remember this is in public preview, so things will get better in the future. I'm sure there'll be support for additional features. And then also the max size of your code file is 1 MB. So that little screenshot that you're looking at on the right, you'll notice that you can embed code there. Like you can literally like upload a file, or you can even embed C# code in there. You have to have a class name script that inherits from script base. And then you also have to have an execute async method. So these are things that you have to, and you can have within the async method, you can call other methods if you want, but that's at a minimum, these are the prerequisites to get started with it. So next up, we'll start looking at a few demos. We're going to be pretty light on presentation today because I know everybody loves demos. They want to see things working, and it makes it easier to look at stuff virtually working. So here is a sample public API that I have. And what this does is just spits out a list of user information like IDs, email, like this sort of dummy data that I'm going to be using in my custom connector. And what I've done for the purposes of our demo is that I've wrapped that behind an APIM, an API management layer, just so I can, make calls and walk you through it. Now you'll notice that this call over here has a lot of chatter. Now let's assume you are the CodeFizz dev in a Fusion team and your business users across the organization are wanting to use this custom, this API layer that talks to legacy systems, and you don't have a predefined connector out there, so you build a custom connector for them. Now a bunch of the teams and your business users don't really need all of this chatter around. All they need is just this array of user information and wrapped in an object that's more user-friendly for them. So that's what we're going to see. We're going to see how you can embed code in a custom connector and transform this, pretty much extract this data and wrap it into a custom object and expose that for your business users. So we'll take a look at how we can do that. Now here in my custom connector UI, and you'll notice that this is how I have it set up. This is my endpoint. I have my base URL. It's using an API key. And then we have our definitions. I have my actions, which is going to be getting my API users. Nothing too complex here. I'm just going to go on to the code preview section. So when you are in the custom connector UI, you will notice that there's a fourth segment called code, and it will have preview in the text. Now you can upload a file. So remember, it has to be about 1 MB in size. That's the max that it can support. Or you can copy paste code too. Now, when you start working with C# code in here, be sure that you test it locally, because right now you don't have a way to debug within the web interface. But that's something that will be supported and it's coming in the future. But you'll notice that you have a drop down here that actually lists all my actions. So it's pretty smart in a way that you can pick which operation do you want your custom code to override. So when you have custom code embedded and pointed or associated to an operation, it means these are the lines of code that are going to take precedence over your code list definitions. Now, if you don't have anything selected, then the default behavior is it's going to apply these lines of code or this transformation to all of your operations. That's something you want to keep in mind. So let's take a look at what we're doing here. So we have our script class here, and then it's inheriting from script A. And when you first start from scratch, you will see a blurb of a few lines of code with just a hello world example. So it already does all of this outer class and the async method out for you. And then, you can comment out the hello world example and start plugging in your piece of code. And that's what I've done too. So I'm basically initiating a response, and I'm going to make a response to the backend because I'm going to tell my custom connector, hey, I do want to make a response. Let's go bring back my payload. And then if it's a success, then I want to parse my JSON. And you'll notice that by default, this supports Newtonsoft, so which is exciting because a lot of our responses are in formats that you want to transform and manipulate. So it's good news that it already supports Newtonsoft. So I'm parsing that out. And then what I'm doing is I am capturing that data object. So if you remember, we looked at our response, and this is what I want. I want to clear out all the other clutter in this. And so that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm saying, just get me that data object, but then I'm going to create my own object and make it much more user-friendly for my business users to look at. So I'm plugging that in and then returning that as a response. So every time a business user uses this custom connector and make a call to this specific operation, they are going to see this transformed response. They won't see any of the other properties in the JSON object, but just that data object. Now, you do have a way to test it out, but what I'm going to do is just show you a quick test in Flow so we can look at the raw output. So it's just a simple flow. I'm just going to be triggering it manually. I have my action here, and I have pagination enabled, so I'm just going to say, just get me the first page of users. So let's go ahead and get that kicked off here. All right, why don't I do this? Let's go back to a prior run. And let's take a look at that. That way I can show you what that payload is going to look like. All right, so here's our successful run that I ran just a couple of minutes back. And so you'll notice we've made the call. And then if you look at our raw output, now we have a much more cleaner transformed JSON object that our body of parameters that our business users can use. So it really does help change the way Fusion teams work because now you make it really easy for businesses to consume data. They don't have to work through, dropping in a bunch of select or for loops to try and get it out of in a format that they wanted to, and then plug it into a new custom object that they want to create. So you have all of that done, and then now I have a really clean list of user information, and that's pointed to my custom object. So that was a simple example just to show you like how you can extract what payload, the response payload that's coming in, extract the data, and then plug it in to an object. Now, we're going to go ahead and take a look at a slightly more complex scenario. Let's say we want to do a regex validation. Let's say you have API endpoints. I'm going to go get a specific user information, but I want to make sure that the email information in the system is actually valid. So we're going to try and use a regular expression to make sure that the email validation is runs correctly. So what I'm going to do is let's go look at our next API here. So I'm using the same public API. You'll notice that this is the data that it sends back. Now, when I am returning the response through the custom connector to the user back, I don't want to be giving them any of these. All I want to do is just extract the email and then run the regular expression. Excuse me. So I'm going to. Sorry about that. So I'm going to extract the email information, run the regular expression, and check if it's valid. And then I'm going to strip out all of this. I'm going to form my own custom object and return back to the user saying, hey, here's the user's email, and it matched my validation. So let's take a look at how we've built that out. So I have another custom connector pointing to my APIM that's backed by this public API. Nothing too complex. Now we have a few additional operations here. Then I'm going to go to our code preview. So here you'll notice things are a little different. The class and the method are the same, just the content within it is a little different. We're doing the same thing like we did the last time where we are parsing the JSON out. But this time I am navigating to 2 levels to capture what the user email is for that user. And then I'm actually passing in what my regular expression needs to be. So by default, it does support. So, before you, that's why, we mentioned at the very beginning, when you start building out, go check out the supported namespaces, because that would make it really easy for you to plan out how you want your code to be embedded. So I have my regular expression to validate that it's an email. Then finally, I'm transforming it. So I'm creating my own custom object that's going to support everything else that the payload response had. Just plug in the email and then just tell you if it's a valid email or not. And it's going to match the expression and tell me if it's valid or not. So what we're going to do is run a quick test here. Now, while we wait on that to load up, there's something that I wanted to also point out. A couple of things to note, like when you make a change to the code embedded in custom connector, things that I've learned while playing around with this, you have to remember it's in public preview, so things are, there's going to be updates and it's going to evolve with time. So I've noticed that sometimes that when you make an update, it may not reflect right away. So what I normally do is I'll add a okay, there it is. Let me see if I can pull that out to show you what that response needs to look like while that's coming. Yeah, back to what I was going to say. Yeah, so what I normally do is I'll just add another response to just spit out like a dummy text saying hello world, and then I'll let the test it out, and then I'll know that it picked it up, that the new changes have been updated. Then I'll go back and revert my change. So it's intermittent, but it's just something that I wanted to share that I've seen that works well for me. Let's see if it's taking a while. Let's give it one more minute. Well, while we wait for that, maybe I'll move on and talk about the most common, frequently asked questions, and then we'll get back to this, and hopefully it comes up by then. So these are some questions that I had when we first started, and then also I've seen these questions come up in the community as well. One of them is, this is a premium service. So yes, it is, because it's, you're pretty much using custom connectors. It's an extension, so it is a premium service. How to test code. So today there's not a way that you can test code within the interface, but you want to make sure that you test it locally before you upload or use it within the custom connector. If there are errors, it does a good job of indicating that something went wrong, but not exactly what. It wouldn't really compile, and it will throw an error saying something encountered. But that's an indication that something is wrong. So you might want to test locally before you bring it into your custom connector. And then how about logging and debugging, right? Being code first devs, you want to be able to log and trace and be able to debug as you test. Not supported at this time, but it's on the future roadmap, so it's going to be coming. So, and remember, it's in public review, so hopefully before it becomes GA, we'll have all of these features. And then can you access values from the codeless operators in the custom connector? You know how we talked about when you enable custom code, the code is what takes priority over codeless operations in the definition. So if you have an operation tied or associated to the custom code, and when that runs, you cannot access operations for that specific endpoint that this code is applied to. But you should be able to do it for others. But once you have code in place, it overrides it, so you can access them. And then any limits. So this is just a quick review of what we've talked about. Your max execution time should be 5 seconds. It has to be 1 MB of code file size. There has to be one code file per connector, and you can only use the supported namespaces. So those were the frequently asked questions that I wanted to share. I'm going to go ahead and see if, oh, okay. All right, let's see. All right, that's what I wanted to show. So ideally, it would be raw text that I would get back. But let's go back to just to remind you all like what we were actually doing. So we're transforming it. We were applying a regular expression, and then we wanted to format our own response, so the users don't have to work with this whole JSON output that got spit out of this connector. So we're just passing the user email, and we're able to perform a regex expression, and we have a formatted and very clean looking response. So this tells me that this is the user's email ID, and the regular expression matched, and it's a valid email ID. So it's as simple as that. This was just a very high level overview of how you can embed code in custom connectors. I mean, I'm pretty excited about it, and I'm looking forward to trying several other namespaces as well. But I do see this being a huge improvement in the Fusion Dev scenarios, especially. This wanted a quick call out. So you want to learn more about Fusion Devs and how to get involved. Make sure that you check out the Cloud Skills Challenge, and then take a look at the Fusion Dev ebook. And for those of you who have joined me today and who will watch on demand, thanks for taking the time. And you can follow me and you can connect me with these links here. And I am looking forward to hearing how the community uses this feature to solve a variety of problems.